It's definitely the first time I've had a Pink Floyd intro to my sermon. I could get used to that. This week we learned that a woman will be featured on the front of the $20 bill. Yeah. It's going to be 78% the size of the $20 bill that had a man on it. That's a really sad joke. Harriet Tubman will be the woman on the bill, a full-sized bill. She's replacing Andrew Jackson, a slave owner who waged a violent campaign against Native Americans during his presidency. The change is predicted to happen in the year 2020, which many have noted coincides with the 100th anniversary of the ratification of the 19th Amendment, which gave some women the right to vote. Critics have pointed out that it seems odd to celebrate the 19th Amendment with an image of Harriet Tubman, considering that African American women did not win the right to vote until the Voting Rights Act of 1965. And some have pointed out that it seems deeply ironic to commemorate a woman who was bought and sold in slavery by putting her face on money. Fair points. Still, it's an exciting moment. Women have been on money before. Martha Washington was on the half dismy, a $1 silver certificate. Pocahontas, whose real name was Matuaka, was on money, but it was a depiction of her Christian baptism, not good separation of church and state. And holy cow, there's a lot of racism involved in the way her story has been hijacked and Disney-fied. But that's a different sermon. Helen Keller, Sacagawea, and Susan B. Anthony were all on coins. But this moment is a big one because it's the first new face on our paper money since 1929. And the appearance of our currency is deeply symbolic. Meanwhile, though, and this is pretty interesting to contemplate, coins and cash are kind of going out of fashion. Most people these days, and I especially notice this among younger people, they use debit cards, Apple Pay, and other electronic methods of payment. We don't pass a lot of cash around. In fact, when I was trying to track down a dollar bill to use in the story this morning, I had to send one of my family members to the store to get some change. When a person gets paid by their employer, often there isn't even a paper check. Money is deposited electronically, and what do we even mean by deposit anymore, by the way? The bank does not receive a bag of cash to hold on to on your behalf, right? Money is information now. It's data. It works not because we're making transactions with something that's tangible, but because we're making transactions with a big collective leap of faith. And nothing illustrates this fact more vividly than what happened in the country of Brazil. In 1990, Brazil had an inflation rate of 80% per month. Per month. Not per year, per month, 80%. Think about what that means for a second. Imagine something you need, like a staple from the grocery store. Let's say baby wipes. Imagine they cost about $10. This is not a single pack of baby wipes, it's like a triple pack. If it costs $10 at the beginning of the month, then at the end of the month, with an inflation rate of 80%, the same package of wipes costs $18, right? And a month after that, $32, more or less. 1 month after that, $58. And by the end of the year, they cost over $10,000. And you're starting to think it would be more cost-effective to get rid of baby wipes altogether and just keep a box of cash on the changing table. The radio show This American Life ran a story on what this was like for Brazilians. In Brazil, stores had to change their prices every single day to keep up with that hyperinflation. Raising prices was a job just in and of itself. There were store employees hired just to walk through every aisle, raising the prices every single day. People would get their paychecks and they'd try to spend them as fast as they could before they lost their value. And because stores were changing prices every day to keep up with inflation, paychecks lost their value by the hour. People would go to the grocery store and they'd try to stay ahead of that guy that was changing all the prices. They'd run in front of him and just grab something off the shelf before the price went up for that day. Brazilians lived like this for decades. How did it get so bad? It started when the government wanted to build a new capital city in the 1950s in the jungle, the city of Brasilia. It was a very expensive project, and the government didn't have enough money to do it, so they printed some up. Wouldn't that be nice? Just print some money up. Governments can do that. The problem is that if there is $100 in the economy and the government prints up $100 more, then every dollar becomes half as valuable. So the big project kicked off inflation that lasted almost half a century. They tried multiple times to fix the problem. Once, the government tried to enforce a price freeze, but merchants hid their merchandise, waiting for the prices to go up. Brazilians couldn't buy beef at the store because the ranchers literally hid their cows. So that didn't work. Another time, the government tried confiscating everybody's money for a while. They shut down the banks, but it was a disaster. People committed suicide. The president was impeached. And then finally, a small group of economists came up with an idea. They said Brazil had to stop printing so much money, but the country also had to do something much more complicated, seemingly impossible. They had to make people believe in the value of the country's currency again. As long as people believed the money was losing its value all the time, as it had been for so long, the money was going to keep losing its value. It was a self-fulfilling prophecy. That's because the paper or the metal that we think of as money has very little inherent value, as we were talking about with the kids. Its value does not come from what it's made from. A long time ago, people did trade precious things like gold or giant stones that weighed thousands of pounds. Seriously. And in those days, you could see, or you could at least easily imagine that currency had value because it was made of something special. Nowadays, that's not usually the case. A dollar bill and a $100 bill are made of the same thing. Their worth comes from people agreeing to treat them as though they're valuable. In Brazil, people had reached a different agreement, that the money would lose value. And that's what had to change, the economists said. People. People had to change. So, they invented a new currency. It was called the Unit of Real Value, URV. But here's the amazing thing. It would not be printed or made into coins. It would be a virtual currency. The unit of real value was not real, not in the physical sense. After URVs were created, people still had the old currency in their pockets. Those were called cruzeiros. But their paychecks were measured in URVs. And URVs, the people were told, had stable value. Taxes were in URVs, the prices in the stores were changed to URVs too. The economists told the country to start thinking in URVs, and they did. Eventually, since people were thinking in a more stable currency, inflation began to go down. Later, the old cruzeiros were phased out, and URVs were made into actual currency called the real. Hannah Jaffe-Walt, the reporter who told this story on This American Life, said, "Everyone in Brazil collectively tricked themselves into believing that this fake currency was real. And that made it real. Money works because we believe in it. But does that mean that it's imaginary? No. You can tell just by looking around, right? What we believe in shapes our world. We've built a whole global marketplace based on a massive collective agreement about money being of value. Local economies interact with state and national economies, which interact internationally. Some people, having figured out how to manipulate this thing we all believe in to their own advantage, have gotten very, very wealthy. We've got enormous banks, and with it all, growing inequality, with the top 1% now owning half of the world's wealth. These are not imaginary realities, they're real realities. These days, money might be no more tangible than spirit, but somehow it still feels rather taboo, or at least potentially distasteful for clergy to talk about money. Just the other day, I actually came across a blog post while I was researching this sermon that suggested that anyone wearing vestments is primarily out to get your money. And I was glad it's a banned Sunday because we don't wear vestments on these days. I get it. I do get it. And yet, in my experience, ministers, except perhaps televangelists or prosperity gospel types, avoid the subject as much as possible, actually. I think this ban reflects our mixed feelings about it, our fear that money is bad and that wanting it is immoral, even as we know that it's necessary. And we like beautiful things and experiences, and we want to be able to afford many of them. And we get that dopamine rush, most of us, when we buy something new. But we want spirituality to be above money, or at least not swayed by it and seduced by it in the way that politicians and big banks and other people and institutions seem to be all around us. And yet, if money is to be tethered in any way to ethics and compassion, then it needs to be in conversation with the wisdom traditions of our world. It is said that Jesus spoke more about money than about anything else in the Gospels. I haven't counted it up, but it has to be at least true that he said more about money than about homosexuality, because he didn't say anything about that. And it has to be true that he said more about money than about abortion, because he said nothing about that either. The Jewish scriptures also concern themselves not infrequently with fair distribution and generosity of resources. Buddhism was launched by a prince, Gautama, who was uncomfortable with his inherited wealth and the way it gave a false sense of protection from the realities of life, which he found include a thread of suffering from the day we are born until we die. In Islam, the words of the Prophet Muhammad include many passages on business and trade and money and family and community life. The world's great religions are concerned with the moral and human impact of money, and rightly so. But we shy away from it. The congregational consultant Dan Hotchkiss says that in his experience, members of churches usually underestimate the range of incomes in their congregations. He writes, whether the question is how many members of this congregation are currently unemployed, or how many millionaires do we have here, or how many member families could, if they chose, give $10,000 or more to a capital campaign, the estimates are predictably half or less than half of the reality. He adds, we are most comfortable when everyone is equal, so we pretend that it is so. Our access to money and the personal ethic with which we approach it are one of the kinds of diversity among us. But whether you have a little or a lot, your relationship to it is surely a significant part of your time on this earth. If money works because you believe in it, the way it works on your behalf depends on what you believe about it. In our reading this morning, Sri Aurobindo says, money is the visible sign of a universal force. In its origin and its true action, it belongs to the divine. What does he mean by that? What kind of force does money represent? It's one kind of power to get things done, right? To meet our basic needs, to help others, to have certain kinds of experiences. When he says it belongs to the divine, he means that as humans with limited lifespans, we are merely temporary caretakers for whatever comes our way. Whatever power we have, whatever resources are ours, only temporarily. They may be with us for decades or only for a short time, but either way, one thing is for sure, we can't take it with us when we die. Therefore, the way we relate to it and what we do with it is an expression of ourselves and our values. It's an opportunity for us to express ourselves. It's one way we stretch beyond our individuality, and we can have rippling effects in the world that may outlast us. Hotchkiss points out that the way we earn and spend and give away our money during our lifetimes shapes in large part the memories that we leave behind. Money is like energy. It has to flow or have the potential for flowing in order to be useful. If it becomes stagnant beyond the savings we need to ensure our needs are met for the future, then what meaning does it have? But money is not in itself sacred, and it does not represent our value as humans. Because it is valuable, sometimes we conflate it with our own value, our personal value. But here in this place, we are reminded that whatever money a person does or doesn't have, they do have inherent worth and dignity. And we put our money where our mouths are, literally, through service, by giving away as many as 100 bags of groceries each week to hungry people who visit our food pantry, whether they are church members or not. We do it through an after-school tutoring program that serves kids in our local neighborhood. We do it by teaching English to non-native speakers to empower them as active members of a primarily English-speaking economy and community. We do it by hosting homeless families for 4 weeks per year as part of Family Promise, which aggressively works with families to get them back on their feet and quickly reestablished in permanent housing. And we do it by advocating for systemic change with Albuquerque Interfaith. We put our energy, our time, and our money to work for good. It's part of our mission of walking in the ways of love in this world together. A mission that still sometimes feels a little bit countercultural, especially during the rhetoric of a presidential campaign. I'm going to close this morning by telling you 3 practically painless ways that you can direct a little of the energy and power of your money to support this congregation's mission if it is meaningful in your life. Ways that you can give without feeling like you have less. That's win-win, right? The first is, if you choose to shop at Amazon, to start out on the church webpage. There's a link to Amazon on our page, and if you click there to go to the Amazon site, then 5% of your purchase is donated back to First Unitarian. We currently bring in about $1,500 per year through the link, and it goes to a staff appreciation fund. Anything above that will go out to support programs of the congregation. So if a bunch of us start going through that link today, we'll give a nice boost to the operating fund. You pay the same price as you usually would, but 5% goes back to the church instead of to Amazon. That seems pretty good. The next idea is similar. If you shop at Smith's, you can register that free little shopper's card to give money to the church, and that goes straight to outreach programs. The money we receive from Smith's goes directly to programs like Family Promise, the Food Pantry, ESL, and after-school tutoring, wherever the need is. But it has to go to outreach. Smith's is specific about that. And the third thing is to name the church in your estate plan. Now, I know some of you out there are thinking, I don't have an estate plan. Or maybe you're thinking, I don't have an estate, right? But you almost certainly do have something. Even if you don't have a will, for example, if you have a life insurance policy, like one of those free ones that comes from being a member of a credit union, for example, then you could consider designating First Unitarian as one of the beneficiaries. Likewise, with a retirement account, they ask who will receive it in the event of your death because, you can't take it with you. You should ensure that your loved ones are taken care of first. But once you know that they are, you might consider leaving a percentage to First Unitarian. When the church receives a bequest, it goes right to the endowment fund, which is a protected pool of money that's invested socially consciously in the stock market. It makes money from those investments, and some of the money comes back to the church. It's designed to grow year after year so that it becomes a significant source of financial security for this congregation way into the future. An endowment can help a congregation weather lean or even dangerous times like a recession, and in healthy times it can help us launch new projects. Anybody who does that, who names the church in their estate plan in any way, is called a keeper of the flame. And I'm going to end by telling you the story of a member of our congregation who recently made a really wonderful contribution to the future of First Unitarian. Margaret Lang was a member of our Socorro branch, about an hour south of here. She was born in 1918, before most of the roads were paved. Margaret was an independent spirit who left New Jersey for New York City as a young woman, where she lived in a woman's motel. No men allowed, except in the lobby. And she took John Robert Powers classes. She couldn't afford a college degree, and not many women earned them back then anyway, but Margaret took classes to become a secretary, and she managed to become financially independent for her entire adult life. She never married. When she retired, she probably had no idea she would live as long as she did, but she still had a lot of energy. She decided college was more within reach now, and she earned a bachelor's degree at New Mexico Tech at the age of 76. Yeah, that was cool. She gave up drinking and smoking at the age of 90. because she said they just no longer suited her. She lived simply, and she didn't have a lot of monthly income available to give away. There are lots of people who don't have much money to give as a regular contribution, and that's okay. But Margaret was a keeper of the flame. When she died 2 months ago, on March 1st, she was just a few months shy of her 98th birthday. She had received years of loving support and friendship from her fellow UUs in Socorro. And with no children or spouse to take care of with her remaining assets, she left them all to First Unitarian's endowment. Her $100,000 bequest has increased our endowment by about 30%. Because she prepared in advance, her estate did not get bogged down in court proceedings. No money was wasted on that process, and it will have a maximum impact toward a mission that she cared very much about, the mission of a congregation that promotes diversity, love, and service. In this way, Margaret's reach extends beyond the bounds of her life. If you're interested in being a keeper of the flame like Margaret, there are some pink cards in the backs of the seats, and the endowment committee has a table out today. You'll see it on your way to the social hall, and they even have a recording of Margaret speaking in her own words about what she decided to do. And this one's just for you. Since you really should have an estate plan, no matter how much of an estate you have or don't have, for your family's sake, if not for your own sense of directing your energy and resources in this world, I'm going to tell you about a really helpful website. It's gyst.com. That stands for Get Your Stuff Together. gyst.com. It was started by a young mother whose husband died in an accident several years ago, and as she struggled through her grief to track down life insurance policies and retirement account information, she realized how much easier it would have been if they'd just done a little bit of advanced preparation. So she created this website to help people get organized quickly, including do-it-yourself wills. There you go. You can check it out.